Seise's Chronicles of Dread, the Mummified Choir of Whitmore Library. On the morning of November 15, 1821, 40 souls were discovered seated in perfect rows within the reading hall of Whitmore Memorial Library, their bodies preserved as if time itself had ceased to flow around them. Where in the United States are you watching from? Subscribe to Chronicles of Dread so you don't miss the cases history tried to erase. What transpired within those hallowed walls remains one of Pennsylvania's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. The Allegheny County Coroner's Office recorded the deaths as unexplained cessation of vital functions, yet the circumstances surrounding their discovery would challenge every medical understanding of the era. 40 members of the Whitmore Sacred Choir, ranging in age from 17 to 63, sat arranged in their customary formation, hymnals open upon their laps, mouths positioned as if caught mid-verse in eternal song. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Harmony. In the autumn of 1819, the township of Millbrook Valley, nestled 17 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, represented the pinnacle of frontier prosperity. Coal deposits discovered beneath the Monongahela River's tributaries had transformed this modest settlement of 800 souls into a beacon of industrial promise. The town's main thoroughfare, Prosperity Avenue, bore testimony to newfound wealth through its brick-fronted establishments and gas-lit lampposts, innovations that distinguished Millbrook Valley from neighboring townships still dependent upon whale oil and wood smoke. The Sacred Choir of Millbrook Valley emerged from this period of economic expansion, founded by Cornelius Whitmore, a coal merchant whose fortune had swelled beyond his most ambitious calculations. Whitmore, a devout Methodist born in Lancaster County, believed divine providence had blessed his mining ventures, and he sought to honor his creator through musical worship of unprecedented grandeur. In December of 1819, he commissioned the construction of a limestone library bearing his family name, dedicating the structure's second floor exclusively to choral rehearsals and musical instruction. Whitmore's vision attracted musicians from across western Pennsylvania. The choir's director, Maestro Giovanni Torretti, had emigrated from the Papal States following Napoleon's occupation of Rome. Torretti brought with him not merely exceptional musical training, but also knowledge of European acoustic principles that would prove instrumental in the library's unique design. Under his guidance, the choir grew to encompass 40 voices, each selected through rigorous audition processes that tested both vocal capability and moral character. The choir members represented Millbrook Valley's most respected families. Eleanor Pembroke, the soprano soloist, was daughter to the township's physician, Dr. Thaddeus Pembroke. The bass section included Marcus Finnegan, owner of Finnegan's General Mercantile, and his two sons, Patrick and Daniel. Among the tenors stood Reverend Josiah Caldwell of the Methodist Episcopal Church, whose sermons drew congregants from neighboring counties. The alto section featured Mrs. Constance Whitmore herself, the patron's wife, alongside 7 other matrons whose husbands controlled the region's primary industries. Chapter 2. Architecture of Devotion. The Whitmore Memorial Library stood as an architectural marvel unlike any structure west of Philadelphia. Torretti had collaborated with architect Benjamin Hartwell to incorporate specific design elements intended to enhance musical resonance. The building's limestone blocks, quarried from formations near Somerset County, were fitted with mathematical precision to create walls of uniform thickness. The second-floor rehearsal hall measured precisely 64 feet in length, 32 feet in width and 24 feet in height, proportions Torretti claimed would produce perfect harmonic ratios. Most remarkable were the acoustic chambers embedded within the walls themselves. Torretti had studied the resonance principles employed in European cathedrals, adapting these concepts to create a network of hollow spaces that would amplify and sustain vocal harmonies. Small openings, disguised as decorative elements in the wall moldings, connected these chambers to the main rehearsal space. The effect, according to contemporary accounts, was extraordinary. Voices seemed to emanate not merely from the singers themselves, but from the very stones surrounding them. The library's first floor housed an impressive collection of theological works, scientific treatises, and musical manuscripts that Whitmore had acquired through European dealers. The ground-level reading room featured 12 oak tables arranged in precise rows, each equipped with brass reading lamps that cast steady light across leather-bound volumes. A central circulation desk, crafted from Pennsylvania walnut, dominated the entrance hall, while floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the perimeter walls. Above this scholarly sanctuary, the second floor served dual purposes. The eastern half contained Toretti's private music library, including handwritten scores he had rescued from Roman churches during the French occupation. The western half comprised the rehearsal hall, furnished with 4 rows of wooden chairs arranged in traditional choir formation. At the hall's far end, a small pipe organ, imported at considerable expense from a workshop in Baltimore, provided instrumental accompaniment for rehearsals and performances. Chapter 3. Rhythms of Community Life. The Sacred Choir maintained a rigorous rehearsal schedule throughout 1820 and into 1821. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, members gathered for 2 hours of intensive practice, with additional sessions preceding major religious holidays. Their repertoire included traditional Methodist hymns, elaborate psalm settings, and European sacred music that challenged even accomplished singers. Toretti's training methods, learned in Rome's finest conservatories, demanded absolute precision in pitch, timing, and pronunciation. Community members often remarked upon the extraordinary quality of sound emanating from the library during rehearsal hours. Mrs. Adelaide Foster, whose boarding house stood across Prosperity Avenue from the library, recorded in her diary, "The voices rise and fall with such unity that one might believe 40 souls had merged into a single instrument of divine praise. The very air seems to shimmer with their harmonies." The choir's public performances drew audiences from throughout Allegheny County. Their Easter presentation in 1821, featuring Mozart's Ave Verum Corpus alongside traditional American hymns, attracted over 300 attendees to the Methodist Episcopal Church. Reverend Caldwell noted in his parish records that several visitors from Pittsburgh attended specifically to hear Millbrook Valley's renowned choir, bringing considerable prestige to the growing community. Beyond their musical contributions, choir members formed the backbone of Millbrook Valley's social structure. They organized charitable collections for widowed families, coordinated community celebrations, and provided musical instruction to local children. The Whitmore Library became an unofficial community center, hosting town meetings, lectures, and cultural events that enriched the intellectual life of this frontier settlement. During the summer months of 1821, the choir embarked upon an ambitious project, preparing a complete musical setting of the Book of Psalms, with harmonizations composed by Toretti himself. This undertaking required extensive additional rehearsals, often extending past midnight as members worked to master increasingly complex vocal arrangements. Several townspeople reported hearing their practice sessions continuing well into the early morning hours, though they attributed this dedication to the choir's commitment to excellence. Chapter 4. Disturbing Harmonies. The first signs of unusual occurrences emerged during the 3rd week of October, 1821. Mrs. Foster noted in her diary entry dated October 19th. "The choir's rehearsals have taken on a most peculiar quality. Their voices seem to echo long after the singers themselves have departed, as though the library walls have learned to sing in their absence." Other residents began reporting similar phenomena. Samuel Wickham, the town's blacksmith, whose forge operated adjacent to the library, claimed that the hammering of his anvil would sometimes produce musical tones that harmonized with the choir's practice sessions. "It's as though the very iron responds to their singing," he told his wife Martha, according to her subsequent testimony to county investigators. Dr. Pembroke became increasingly concerned about his daughter Eleanor's behavior during this period. The young woman, previously known for her cheerful disposition and social engagement, grew withdrawn and contemplative. She spent long hours at the library outside of scheduled rehearsal times, claiming to study the musical manuscripts in Toretti's collection. Her father noted that she often returned home with dust upon her clothing and an expression of profound absorption, as though she had discovered secrets hidden within those ancient scores. More troubling were the reports of nocturnal activities at the library. Constable William Murphy, during his regular evening patrols, observed lights flickering within the second-floor rehearsal hall at hours when no official choir activities were scheduled. When he investigated on the evening of October 24th, he found the building securely locked, with no signs of unauthorized entry. Yet the sounds of choral singing continued to drift from the upper windows, growing gradually fainter until they ceased entirely near midnight. Several choir members began exhibiting unusual physical symptoms during the final week of October. Mrs. Pembroke complained to her husband about recurring dreams in which she found herself singing alongside voices she could not identify, voices that seemed to originate from the library's limestone walls rather than human throats. Marcus Finnegan told his wife that he felt compelled to visit the library during daylight hours, claiming that the building itself seemed to call to him with musical summons he could not resist. Maestro Toretti's behavior during this period raised particular concern among his colleagues. The Italian musician, normally gregarious and animated, became increasingly secretive about his work. He was observed entering the library before dawn and remaining until well past sunset, emerging only to procure basic necessities from local merchants. When questioned about his activities, he spoke vaguely of perfecting the harmonic resonance and achieving the ultimate synthesis of voice and stone. Chapter 5. The Final Rehearsal. November 14th, 1821, marked the choir's final scheduled rehearsal before their planned Thanksgiving performance. According to the attendance record maintained by Mrs. Whitmore, all 40 members arrived promptly at 7 o'clock that evening. Several townspeople later testified that the rehearsal began normally, with the familiar sounds of scales and vocal warm-up exercises emanating from the second-floor hall. However, as the evening progressed, the nature of their musical practice underwent a disturbing transformation. Mrs. Foster recorded in her diary, "By 9 o'clock their singing had assumed qualities I had never before encountered. The harmonies seemed to possess substance, as though sound itself had acquired weight and texture. My boarding-house windows vibrated in their frames, and I observed that dust motes in the lamplight moved in patterns that matched their musical phrases." Constable Murphy, conducting his evening rounds, noted that an unusual number of townspeople had gathered along Prosperity Avenue to listen to the choir's rehearsal. Men and women stood motionless upon the sidewalks, their faces turned upward toward the library's illuminated windows. When Murphy approached several of these listeners, he found them unresponsive to his inquiries, their attention fixed entirely upon the music flowing from above. The rehearsal continued far beyond its customary 2-hour duration. By 11 o'clock, the choir's voices had achieved a unity that defied natural explanation. Individual vocal parts became indistinguishable, merging into a single harmonic structure that seemed to possess its own life and will, and Dr. Pembroke, growing concerned about his daughter's prolonged absence, attempted to enter the library but found the main doors locked from within, a violation of Maestro Toretti's usual practice of keeping the building accessible during rehearsals. Near midnight, the singing reached a crescendo of impossible complexity. Those who witnessed this final phase described harmonies that encompassed frequencies beyond the normal range of human hearing, yet somehow remained audible and profoundly moving. The limestone walls of the library began to emit a faint phosphorescent glow, visible to observers across the street. This luminescence pulsed in rhythm with the choir's vocalizations, creating an effect that several witnesses compared to watching the building itself breathe. At precisely 11 minutes past midnight, the music ceased with such abruptness that the sudden silence struck listeners like a physical blow. The library's windows went dark simultaneously, and the phosphorescent glow faded from its walls. The crowd that had gathered along Prosperity Avenue dispersed slowly, many appearing confused about how they had come to be standing in the street at such an hour. At dawn on November 15th, Mrs. Martha Wickham arrived at the library to perform her customary cleaning duties. She found the main entrance unlocked, an unusual circumstance as Toretti typically secured the building following evening rehearsals. Upon entering the ground floor reading room, she observed that several books had been displaced from their proper shelves, lying open upon the reading tables as though recently consulted. The pages visible contained musical notation and text in languages she could not identify. Mrs. Wickham proceeded to the second floor to begin cleaning the rehearsal hall. What she discovered there would haunt her remaining days and challenge every medical understanding of her era. The 40 members of the sacred choir sat in their customary formation, arranged in 4 precise rows facing the small pipe organ. Their hymnals lay open upon their laps, their mouths positioned as though caught in the midst of song. Their eyes remained open, gazing upward toward the hall's vaulted ceiling with expressions of profound serenity. Yet these were not the bodies of the recently deceased. The choir members had undergone a transformation that defied natural processes. Their flesh had acquired the consistency and coloration of aged parchment, stretched taut over perfectly preserved skeletal structures. Their clothing remained intact and undisturbed, bearing no signs of decay or deterioration. Most remarkably, their positions showed no evidence of the muscular relaxation that accompanies death. They sat upright with perfect posture, their hands positioned as though still holding their hymnals, their faces displaying the focused concentration of active performers. Mrs. Wickham's screams brought immediate assistance from neighbouring establishments. Dr. Pembroke arrived within minutes, followed closely by Constable Murphy and several prominent townsmen. The physician's initial examination revealed circumstances that challenged his medical training. The bodies showed no signs of violence, disease, or natural death. Their skin, though dramatically altered in texture and appearance, remained supple to the touch. Most disturbing was the complete absence of decay, no odor of decomposition, no evidence of insect activity, no indication that natural post-mortem processes had commenced. When Dr. Pembroke attempted to move his daughter Eleanor from her position in the soprano section, he discovered that her body had somehow become integrated with the wooden chair upon which she sat, not through any physical attachment or adhesive process, but through what he could only describe as a molecular fusion of flesh and timber. Similar phenomena affected all 40 choir members. They had become permanent fixtures within the rehearsal hall, as much a part of the library's architecture as the limestone walls surrounding them. The Allegheny County coroner, Dr. Ezra Hawthorne, arrived from Pittsburgh on November 17th to conduct official examinations of the deceased choir members. His preliminary findings, recorded in documents later sealed by county authorities, described physiological conditions that contradicted established medical knowledge. The bodies had undergone what he termed spontaneous mummification, a preservation process typically requiring specific environmental conditions and considerable time, yet apparently achieved instantaneously within the library's rehearsal hall. Dr. Hawthorne's measurements revealed that the hall's atmospheric conditions remained within normal parameters. Temperature, humidity, and air circulation showed no unusual characteristics that might explain the preservation of organic tissues. More puzzling was his discovery that the acoustic properties of the space had been fundamentally altered. Sound no longer resonated within the chamber, as Toretti had originally designed. Instead, the hall had become acoustically dead. Voices and instruments produced flat, lifeless tones that seemed to be absorbed by the very air itself. The investigation expanded to include examination of Maestro Toretti's private music library. Among his manuscripts, authorities discovered documents that raised disturbing questions about the choir director's true intentions. Several scores bore annotations in Latin that appeared to describe techniques for binding souls through harmonic resonance and achieving permanence through vocal unity. These cryptic notations suggested that Toretti had been conducting experiments that extended far beyond conventional musical instruction. Most significant was the discovery of a leather-bound journal hidden within the organ's pipe chamber. Written in Toretti's distinctive hand, the journal detailed his growing obsession with creating what he termed eternal music, compositions that would continue beyond the limitations of mortal performance. The final entries, dated just days before the choir's last rehearsal, described his conviction that he had discovered the proper harmonic sequences to achieve this supernatural objective. Local authorities attempted to question residents who had witnessed the final rehearsal, but these interviews yielded contradictory and often incoherent testimonies. Many witnesses claimed to have no clear memory of the events, describing the evening as though experienced through a profound dream. Others provided detailed accounts that contradicted physical evidence, claiming to have seen additional figures among the choir members or describing musical instruments that were not present in the rehearsal hall. The investigation reached its official conclusion on December 3, 1821, when county authorities declared the deaths to be the result of unknown natural causes aggravated by unique environmental factors. This deliberately vague determination satisfied legal requirements while avoiding the more disturbing implications of Dr. Hawthorne's findings. The bodies were left undisturbed in their positions, as attempts to remove them had proven both impossible and damaging to the preserved remains. In the weeks following the official investigation, Millbrook Valley began to experience the consequences of its tragic loss. 40 families had lost beloved members under circumstances that defied rational explanation. The economic impact proved equally devastating, as many of the deceased had been essential to the community's commercial operations. Marcus Finnegan's mercantile closed permanently, as neither of his sons had survived to continue the business. Dr. Pembroke, devastated by his daughter's death and unable to provide medical explanations for the tragedy, relocated his practice to nearby Greensburg. Cornelius Whitmore, the library's founder and patron, suffered what contemporary accounts described as a complete nervous collapse. The loss of his wife, combined with the horrible transformation of his philanthropic vision into a charnel house of preserved corpses, left him incapable of managing his business interests. He spent increasing amounts of time at the library, sitting in the first-floor reading room and staring upward toward the ceiling that separated him from his wife's mummified remains. The Whitmore Memorial Library was officially closed to public access on January 15, 1822. County authorities sealed the second floor to prevent further disturbance of the preserved choir members, while maintaining minimal access to the ground floor collection for researchers who could demonstrate legitimate scholarly purposes. However, few visitors availed themselves of this opportunity, as rumors about the building's supernatural properties discouraged all but the most determined investigators. Strange phenomena continued to be reported in connection with the sealed library. Residents of Prosperity Avenue claimed to hear faint singing emanating from the building during certain weather conditions, particularly on foggy evenings when atmospheric pressure was low. These reports became sufficiently frequent that Constable Murphy included them in his official log, though he noted that his own investigations never confirmed the presence of any sounds. More troubling were the reports of physical effects experienced by individuals who spent extended periods near the library. Several people claimed to feel an overwhelming compulsion to sing while in the building's vicinity, as though the preserved choir was somehow recruiting new voices for their eternal performance. Mrs. Foster noted in her diary that her own humming would spontaneously harmonize with sounds she could not consciously detect, creating musical intervals that she had never learned but somehow instinctively understood. By 1825, Millbrook Valley's population had declined by nearly half as families relocated to escape what they perceived as a cursed location. The coal mining operations that had originally attracted settlers continued to operate, but under management relocated to Pittsburgh. The town's commercial district gradually deteriorated as businesses failed to replace the community leaders who had been lost in the choir tragedy. The systematic removal of records relating to the Whitmore Library tragedy began in 1827, when the newly appointed Allegheny County Administrator ordered the consolidation of local government documents. Files pertaining to the choir deaths were reportedly transferred to state archives in Harrisburg, but no evidence of their arrival at that facility has ever been found. Dr. Hawthorne's detailed medical reports, along with testimonies collected during the official investigation, simply vanished from public records. This documentary purge extended beyond government files to include private sources of information about the tragedy. The Pittsburgh Gazette, which had reported on the deaths in November 1821, later claimed that their archive copies containing these articles had been destroyed in a fire that left all other editions from that period intact. Similar unexplained losses occurred at other regional newspapers, effectively eliminating contemporary journalistic accounts of the incident. Perhaps most significantly, the property records for the Whitmore Memorial Library underwent mysterious alterations. By 1830, official documents listed the building as having been constructed in 1823, 2 years after the choir tragedy had occurred. The building's architectural specifications were also modified in these records, with no mention of the acoustic chambers and specialized design features that Toretti had incorporated into the original structure. Religious records proved equally unreliable as sources of historical information. The Methodist Episcopal Church of Millbrook Valley, where Reverend Caldwell had served before his death with the choir, burned to the ground in the winter of 1828. Church officials claimed that all parish records were destroyed in this fire, including baptismal certificates, marriage documents, and membership rolls that would have provided evidence of the choir members' existence. The few residents who remained in Millbrook Valley after 1830 seemed to develop a collective amnesia regarding the choir tragedy. When questioned by occasional visitors or researchers, they would claim ignorance of any unusual deaths or supernatural occurrences. Some insisted that the library had never housed a choir, describing it as having been constructed solely for reading and study purposes. Others denied that a choir had ever existed in Millbrook Valley, suggesting that questioners must be confusing their community with some other location. Even physical evidence of the tragedy underwent systematic alteration. The Whitmore family cemetery, located on a hillside overlooking the town, contained elaborate monuments marking the deaths of choir members. By 1835, these gravestones had been removed or relocated, replaced by simple markers bearing different names and dates. The official explanation cited concerns about structural stability of monuments placed on the hillside's unstable soil, but no evidence of geological problems was ever documented. In 1845, 24 years after the choir tragedy, the Whitmore Memorial Library was quietly sold to a private collector from Philadelphia, who specialized in acquiring properties with unusual historical significance. The purchaser, identified in legal documents only as J. Thornfield, Esquire, paid substantially more than the building's assessed value and immediately arranged for additional security measures to be installed. Under Thornfield's ownership, access to the library became even more restricted. The ground floor reading room was permanently closed, and the building's windows were covered with heavy curtains that prevented any view of the interior. Local residents reported seeing occasional lights moving through the darkened rooms, but no visitor was ever observed entering or leaving the premises. The most significant change involved the building's acoustic properties. Neighbors noticed that the library had somehow become completely soundproof. No noise of any kind emerged from within its walls, even during periods when lights suggested that activities were occurring inside. This silence was so complete that it seemed to absorb sounds from the surrounding environment, creating a dead zone of quietness that extended several yards beyond the building's perimeter. In 1856, Thornfield arranged for the construction of a stone wall surrounding the library property, further isolating the building from public access. The wall bore no identifying markers or signs, giving the impression that the enclosed space contained nothing more significant than an abandoned structure. A single iron gate, kept permanently locked, provided the only means of entry to the grounds. Correspondence discovered decades later in Philadelphia, legal archives revealed that Thornfield had been acting as an agent for a consortium of collectors who specialized in acquiring artifacts and locations connected to unexplained phenomena. The group, which appeared to include wealthy individuals from Boston, New York, and Charleston, maintained similar properties throughout the eastern United States, all purchased under circumstances that suggested official encouragement or cooperation from local authorities. The final documented reference to the choir tragedy appeared in a private letter written by Dr. Hawthorne to a colleague in Baltimore, dated December 1857. In this correspondence, the former coroner expressed his frustration with the systematic suppression of information about the Millbrook Valley incident. "They have succeeded in erasing nearly every trace of what we witnessed," he wrote. "Future generations will find no evidence that 40 souls achieved in death what they could never accomplish in life, perfect, eternal harmony." The town of Millbrook Valley continued to exist as a small mining community until the coal deposits were exhausted in 1902. The remaining residents relocated to nearby industrial centers, leaving behind empty buildings and overgrown streets. The Whitmore Memorial Library stood abandoned but intact, its stone walls proving more durable than the wooden structures that had housed the surrounding community. In 1925, A survey team from the Pennsylvania Historical Society attempted to document abandoned buildings throughout the coal mining regions. When they reached the site of former Millbrook Valley, they found clear evidence of a substantial settlement: foundation stones, rusted machinery, and the remnants of commercial buildings. However, they discovered no trace of any library building, despite clear indications that such a structure had once existed at the center of the community. The survey team's report noted unusual acoustic phenomena in the area where the library had apparently stood. Sound behaved strangely in this location, with voices carrying much farther than normal atmospheric conditions should have permitted. Team members also reported an inexplicable urge to sing or hum while working in this area, as though the ground itself was somehow encouraging musical expression. Modern researchers who have attempted to investigate the Millbrook Valley choir tragedy have encountered systematic obstacles in accessing relevant documentation. Official records from Allegheny County contain no reference to the incident, while newspaper archives consistently show gaps in their collections, corresponding to November 1821. Church records, cemetery documents, and private correspondence from the period appear to have been comprehensively purged from both public and private collections. Yet, traces of the story persist in unexpected forms. Folk songs collected throughout western Pennsylvania during the late 19th century contain recurring references to 40 voices singing as one and the choir that never dies. These ballads, passed down through oral tradition, describe events that match many details of the Whitmore Library tragedy, though they typically locate the incidents in unnamed ghost towns or places that time forgot. The most compelling evidence may be the continuing reports of unusual acoustic phenomena in areas where significant limestone formations occur throughout Pennsylvania. Musicians and acoustics researchers have documented locations where vocal harmonies achieve extraordinary resonance, creating effects that seem to transcend the normal limitations of human voices and natural architecture. These sites share common characteristics that match the original specifications of the Whitmore Memorial Library: limestone construction with specific proportional relationships, embedded acoustic chambers, and orientations that align with particular geological features. Whether these similarities represent coincidence, intentional replication, or something far more disturbing remains a question that challenges both scientific understanding and historical documentation. The fate of the 40 choir members, preserved in their eternal performance within the sealed halls of the Whitmore Memorial Library, serves as a reminder that some mysteries transcend the boundaries of conventional investigation. Their voices, silenced by forces that defy explanation, continue to echo through the incomplete records and suppressed testimonies of those who witnessed their final, impossible harmony. In the end, the tragedy of Millbrook Valley presents questions that reach beyond the scope of historical inquiry, into realms where music, mortality, and the persistence of human will intersect in ways that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself.